Hi everyone, I'm happy to be sharing my work here today with you all. My name is Chesney and I want to present a part of my PhD titled Using Group Interviews to Understand Primate Distribution, Behaviour and Human-Primate Interactions Inside and Outside Protected Areas in Southern Guinea-Bissau over time. We will talk about reported distribution, abundance, perceived population trends and the reasons for losses in each species. Our objectives were to observe reported changes in primate distribution over time, to record abundance and population trends of primates as perceived by those sharing the landscape with them, how this changes over time and why people think these changes happened or are happening, to reflect on the impacts of the creation and development of protected areas on human-primate coexistence, and an overall aim is to both time and cost-effectively inform conservation management and identify priority areas for intervention on a landscape, even regional level. So, as we know, typically conservation strategies establish areas of intervention, identify threats to wildlife, and prioritise activities to eliminate them, often failing to incorporate the knowledge or the role of local people, jeopardising sometimes conservation efforts. With wildlife populations plummeting and continued habitat loss, investigating local ecological knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge and its incorporation into conservation is increasingly vital. Humans' closest living relatives, non-human primates, hereafter I'm just going to say primates, offer insights into our evolution and behaviour and represent important parts of ecosystem health and regeneration, as well as in many cultures and livelihoods in many societies, and yet are facing an extinction crisis. Primates are distributed primarily across tropical landscapes. At least 60% of primate species are threatened with extinction, and more than 75% of primate populations are decreasing, threatened by factors including habitat loss and hunting. Rural communities in West Africa are dependent on subsistence agriculture and manage complex interactions in their coexistence with wildlife. Primates as a behaviourally flexible taxa can be particularly challenging as they adapt their spatiotemporal use of their environment to optimise feeding that promotes close human interactions, for example crop foraging. This is the first project to investigate perceived sociopolitical and ecological drivers affecting primate distribution, behaviour and human-primate interactions of 10 species through group interviews, both inside and outside formerly protected areas. Research outside protected areas is important because the majority of primate populations inhabit areas under no formal protection, including over 80% of critically endangered Western chimpanzees. This is also the first project to our knowledge to compare data from the same locations over an 18-year period, both inside and outside. So where? This fieldwork is in Guinea-Bissau in West Africa. Usually we work in Cantonesh National Park, this coloured part of the peninsula in the south, but this project looks outside the national park too. We use semi-structured interviews in groups with photo elicitation exercises. You can see the flashcard for black and white colobus here with the name in different ethnic group languages to help with identification and promoting discussion. Participants were selected based on convenience. On arrival in each village, we spoke with elders or those responsible in their absence and asked them if we could jumbai, which is like to hang out, and do an interview with those present in the village and interested in participating. There were no obligations implied, directly or indirectly by us, and self-selection of participants happened organically in most cases through our arrival and our presentation, or sometimes was organised by the group themselves. Age, gender and occupation, as well as other demographic characteristics were not stipulated by us, other than we did ask the group have men and women and like old people and young people as well. This sampling method aimed to include perceptions of people in the village present at the time of the interview that could represent more or less opinions of the village as a whole. Interview attendees were asked to name and describe each primate shown on a flashcard. We asked, is this species present or absent? And then, if they said absent, had they ever been present? If they had been present, when were they last seen, or why do you think they were no longer present? If they responded they were present, then we asked, in relation to 20 years ago, are they the same in number, more or less? When were these changes first observed and why? If they are present, do you consider them to be a lot, a normal amount, or not that many? And when were these changes first observed and why? In 2006-2009, Claudia Souza, my supervisor, Mele Frazão Moreira, conducted 142 interviews in a wider range with a car, and we compare 44 of these interviews with ours from 2022 to 2024, when Helen Bersakala and I conducted 52 interviews, these blue dots, in a smaller range, but just with bicycles and canoes. And yeah, so around 3,000 people have been involved in these interviews in southern Guinea-Bissau. To date. There are many methods for understanding wildlife distribution. Typically, these methods are more biological, for example, genetic censusing, camera trapping, biomonitoring, and while these methods can result in precise data and may give additional information on other species, the habitat, and even health of individuals, these are often very expensive and time-consuming. So what about social methods for understanding wildlife distribution? They also have disadvantages and limitations such as scalable comparability and bias resulting from either the interviewer and the interviewee or both. Questionnaires, for example, they can be fast, cheap, and relatively comparable, but they also may only result in really surface level data. One-on-one interviews can result in very in-depth descriptions of specific places, but can be very time-consuming and can result in just one person's point of view, which may be expressed with a specific objective. So here we use group interviews, and like the other social methods, they can result in a lot of data quite quickly. They're specific to a place and a description of a community's experience with that species, not limited to one person's point of view, although potentially sometimes in a group you get a louder or a more expressive person talking. But we tried to combat this because there was 3 of us present in the interviews, 3 researchers, and so we would sit in different parts of the group and try and encourage everybody to take part. Group interviews with representatives from the community can tell us about wildlife distribution, abundance, and population trends, like I'm going to report here in this presentation. And they can also tell us about human-wildlife coexistence, about conflicts, about sharing space, and about a whole host of other dynamics present in human-wildlife interactions. But that's another chapter of my thesis and another presentation for another day. So here I'm just going to talk about the more sort of typically biologically generated, biological data, but generated through these group interviews about primates. So which primates? There are 10 or 11 species, including at least 2 nocturnal primates, identifiable with some certainty and also present within the last 20 years in all study areas are 6 diurnal, and the main 6 I'll show results for. So that's chimps, the 2 colobus monkeys, baboons, Campbell's monkeys, and green monkeys. And here I present results for 2 objectives about the reported presence or absence of these primates. So what's changed over time since 2006 till now, 2024? If reported present before, are they still now, and why? And what has been the effect of the national park established in 2011? Have rates of decrease been lesser inside the national park than outside? And so I'm going to show you basically a map, but we're going to build the map together because otherwise it's like a little much. And it's good as a recording because I guess we can pause and look if we need more time. So what we see in returning more or less to the same villages is both changes in presence and absence and in reported abundance over time. So in these figures, an X represents absence and the size of the dot represents the reported abundance when present. So a small dot, not many left, medium, a medium amount, and a big dot, a lot. The darker grey on the map, kind of in the middle, that's Canterbury National Park. So for some species like green monkeys, as you can see, neither time nor the presence of the national park has had major impacts. They were present across the region in 2006 and they remain pretty much present today. They were present in all villages interviewed in the first field season and in 94% in the most recent field season. So that's just a reduction of about 6% in terms of reported distribution. For others, such as Campbell's monkeys, over time they have reduced outside the national park, and so they're now absent a lot in many areas of Catio, so that's the section sort of northwest of the national park. But across southern Guinea-Bissau they've reduced by 14%. Baboons, then Guinea baboons, they've also decreased both inside and outside the national park. They've reduced by about 39%, so quite a lot. And more shocking still is the reported reduction in colobus monkeys. So they were similarly present as the Campbell's monkeys before, but red colobus are now absent everywhere outside the national park, pretty much. Populations inside the national park are limited to central forest blocks. Red colobus have reportedly reduced by 57.8% and king colobus, or black and white colobus, by 58.4%. So that's a huge reduction in distribution and abundance. Now on to chimpanzees, and these percentages on the slide now represent reductions over time. However, in the case of chimpanzees, they've reportedly increased in terms of their distribution by 14%. So what we can see from these interviews are changes in reported abundance as well as distribution. So that was like the size of the dot on the map. So post-interview, we categorised responses when the species were present regarding perceived abundance into 3 categories. So not many was given a value of 1, a normal amount, or quite a lot, whatever, was a value of 2, but a lot, or that was given a value of 3. So the average across the 2 field seasons is reported here. So the blue line above is the field season in 2006-2009, and then the orange line is now. So as we can see, all primates have reportedly reduced in abundance. For example, as we saw, chimpanzees reportedly increasing in their geographical distribution by 14%. They're in fact still reported as less abundant than before. And more or less, reported abundance follows the same pattern as reported distribution. Baboons and colobus monkeys, the most affected, and chimpanzees, the least affected. So how do people describe these changes over time? And sorry again, because I'm going to build the slide to be quite a lot, but anyway, we organise responses into 2 categories. So these 2 categories are deforestation, which includes habitat conversion, loss and fragmentation for reasons including agriculture and infrastructure development. In Guinea-Bissau, cashew plays a huge role here. Before the 1950s, cashew in southern Guinea-Bissau was low to non-existent. In 2022, approximately 13% of the land use within Cantonesh and more outside the national park is designated for cash crop cashew orchards. Here, deforestation and other habitat changes are represented in green. These landscape changes affect not only primate population numbers, but also their behaviour and therefore their interactions with people, which has some influence into the second category, which is hunting, represented here in red. Hunting does play a role, but local consumption is really just like the tip of the iceberg. In our interviews, people reported periods of really intense hunting, especially during times of civil unrest. So here I'm going to show results just from the most recent field season between 2022 and 2024. So for green monkeys, the decrease is explained in 38% of interviews to be caused by hunting. No one attributed changes in their distribution or abundance to deforestation or changes in habitat. A similar story is told for Campbell's monkeys. So hunting was mentioned in 40% of interviews and deforestation in just 2%. Hunting is also attributed to the losses in baboons and the other 2 Campbell's monkeys, but unlike the 2 monkeys on the right, the Campbell's and the green, deforestation and other habitat changes are said to play a role too. 17% of villagers mention habitat changes for baboons, 15 and 12% for black and white and red colobus respectively. Chimps, ever the outlier, aren't hunted, and deforestation affects them only just over the average for the other 5 species, about 12%. In these interviews, we also asked about population trends, and here we report results, again, just from this most recent field season. In line with the distribution and abundance results, we see more reported decreases, so that's the red, in the baboons, in the top middle here, and the black and white colobus and the red colobus, and less for the Campbells and the green monkeys. And as we saw with distribution and abundance, in terms of reported population trends too, there's much more reported increasing in the chimpanzees and much less reported decreasing. But why? When every other species of primate is decreasing, reportedly in terms of spatial distribution, abundance and population trend, are chimpanzees relatively not. Some of it for sure has biological reasons in terms of like their ability to adapt and so on, but people report often along the lines that they're the only primates still here with big populations. All other primates were hunted 10 years ago to almost decimation, and chimps are, I won't say never, but like very, very, very rarely hunted in Guinea-Bissau, and I would say never are they hunted for food. But this isn't really to be confused with like a love for chimpanzees. One man told us, talking about his orange orchard, even in old times they weren't killed because we can't. I want them all gone, to kill them all. Yesterday I shot at one, not to kill it but to scare them away. The group that gets shot at leaves for a long time, but then another group will come. If we don't shoot at them, then the children get beaten. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm currently writing a draft of the paper. It isn't necessary to compare maybe, but these results are in line with what we know from camera traps, genetics and biomonitoring in Cantonesh. So I may compare in some way, but this is mostly only available for inside the national park and not outside. I'm also in the process of returning results to communities and stakeholders, including the protected area management. I've shared the map with them, and a radio programme about the plight of the colobus has been recorded by Helen and America Sanya, the co-director of Cantonesh National Park. There's work to be done on the conservation of primates for sure, like everywhere. They're decreasing in spatial distribution and abundance, fueled by habitat changes and degradation and hunting, sometimes for live capture for pets, like in this images, other times for food, other times for retaliation, and so on. And yeah, maybe in 20 more years another comparison can be made. I wonder what those results will show, not to sound too pessimistic, but just now to say thank you for listening. I welcome any and all feedback. Here's my funders, and I'd also like to thank all of our interviewees and our amazing team in Guinea-Bissau, especially Yaya Mamadou and the Bissau Guinean Institute for Biodiversity and Protected Areas. I'd also like to thank Claudia Souza, who started this work in 2006 and is sadly no longer with us. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments on the app, or you can send me an email. Thank you very much.